You know, if you're a fan of mixed martial arts, whether it's a longtime fan or even if you're a brand new fan to the sport, you've heard this said at least once. Fighting is 10% physical and 90% mental. Now, when you hear that, it kind of sounds nerdy. There's a cliche to saying that, but there's truth to that. And perhaps the best example that I can use to illustrate or maybe even prove that saying is GSP, the longtime welterweight champion. Before GSP solidified himself as the welterweight champion, before GSP went from chasing and winning the championship to defending the championship, GSP was a certain type of fighter. He was aggressive. Some might even describe him as a risk taker. And most definitely, he was a finisher. GSP stopped opponents. But then once GSP won the championship and he went from chasing a title to defending the championship, there was a switch mentally in the way he approached fights. His skills did not diminish. In fact, the opposite is the case. GSP got better. He became a more dangerous fighter. But that did not exactly translate to the way he fought. There was a mental switch. GSP became safer. And perhaps the way I can describe it in simple terms is using something that I'm pretty sure you've heard before. GSP was fighting for a long time. GSP was fighting to not lose as opposed to fighting to win. 8 fights in a row, he won by decision. And then, of course, he ran into Johnny Hendricks, a fight that he won by split decision, and GSP retired. He left the sport. Then he comes back against Michael Bisping in a middleweight division, an opponent that is bigger, a natural middleweight. Mind you, this is GSP that for years and years and years was no longer known as a finisher, a man that we all came to expect decisions from. He goes up to middleweight, a man that's not known for having brain-shattering power, and what does he do? He drops Michael Bisping with a left hook, finishes Michael Bisping, wins the championship, wins the middleweight championship. What happened there? Did GSP get exponentially better once he moved to the middleweight division after leaving the sport for a long time? I don't think so. It was another switch in mentality, the opposite of what happened when GSP became champion. He made a decision to fight more aggressively, to sit down more on his punches, and that resulted in a finish. Example number 2. Jose Aldo. Before Jose Aldo became the longtime featherweight champion in the UFC, he was aggressive. He was borderline wild. He was exciting, flying knees all over the place. And then Jose Aldo became champion, and that belt meant so much to him. The title meant so much to him. Once again, another example of a fighter that started to fight to not lose as opposed to fighting to win. He became safer, less exciting. And in recent times, we've seen him make a slight switch, a slight adjustment to get him more aggressive again. And of course, we've seen him get back to finishing opponents. Why am I bringing this up? When I think about UFC 244, I feel like this card is defined by mentality. A lot of the fighters on this card that performed, my favorite fights on this card can be traced back to a switch in mentality. Let's start things off with the light heavyweight division, Corey Anderson. Now, Corey Anderson is the classic wrestle boxer. He wants to grapple you, take you down, smother you repeatedly. If he's not able to take you down, he's going to land combinations. But every single shot he lands on the feet is designed to do one thing, to set up the takedown. Going into this fight versus Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker, a man who is extremely exciting, flashy, tall, fast, athletic. A man who a lot of people believed is going to be the next guy to challenge Jon Jones, possibly even be the man to beat Jon Jones in the light heavyweight division. Going into that fight, Corey Anderson had a huge chip on his shoulder. For a long time, he believed that he is the rightful next contender, the next fighter to challenge Jon Jones for that championship. And a lot of people were writing him off. A lot of people believed that he was going to get stopped because apart from that, before that fight, Johnny Walker has been nothing but spectacular in the octagon. The fight starts off and we see right away we can see a different version of Corey Anderson. The man is aggressive. He's throwing combinations. And of course, what do we see? He's able to rock and hurt Johnny Walker with an overhand right, drops him, gets on top, throws a few combinations, backs him up to the cage, flurries, and he's able to get a standing TKO. A wrestler, standing TKO. Once again, a man who made a decision. He's no longer playing around. He's no longer going to go in there to fight not to lose. He's going to go in there with the mentality to stop the opponent, and that is exactly what he did. He made a statement. Second fighter that made a slight switch in mentality, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Stephen Thompson is a karate fighter. He's a very, very elusive karate-style kickboxer, point fighter, if you will. His whole entire style revolves around moving backwards for the most part, circling around the cage, looking for angles, keeping himself safe and focusing mostly on defense. That is not the version of Wonderboy that we saw in this fight. The version of Wonderboy that we saw against Vicente Luque was a more aggressive Wonderboy Thompson. He was sitting down in his punches. We saw him throwing overhands at times. We saw Stephen Wonderboy throwing hooks. When's the last time you saw Wonderboy wing hooks at the opponent? His whole entire demeanor changed. It was a mental switch. His goal was to stop the opponent because he knew coming into that fight his back was against the wall. He just got stopped with Anthony Showtime Pettis, and he had to perform. He had to make a statement. And that is exactly what he did. He went into that fight, made a solid statement, absolutely put on a technical striking masterpiece, and won the fight. Next example of a fighter that made a slight switch, not for the exciting, but a switch nonetheless, Darren Till and Kelvin Gastelum, the co-main event. Before this fight, of course, we saw Kelvin Gastelum in an incredible fight against Israel Adesanya. Mind you, Israel Adesanya is known for kickboxing. The man is a kickboxing world champion. That is what he does best. But for a majority of the fight, in fact, for the whole entire fight, Kelvin Gastelum stood and traded with Israel Adesanya. But in his fight versus Darren Till, we saw a switch in mentality. We saw the wrestler Kelvin Gastelum, a Kelvin Gastelum that wasn't quite comfortable with just standing on the feet and trading. Now, of course, a huge part of that can be blamed on the fact that Darren Till was doing a very good job of stifling the offense and stopping him every single time that Kelvin Gastelum attempted to close that distance with his boxing. Darren Till did a very good job of crashing in, taking away that offense on the inside. And yes, that forced Kelvin Gastelum into grappling. But we saw him shoot more takedowns in this fight than we've seen him do in a lot of fights in a very long time. Once again, a switch in mentality. He was less aggressive. He wasn't pushing the fight as hard as we know that Kelvin Gastelum can. In the third round, he sort of did, but it was mostly with takedowns. With Darren Till, on the other hand, completely with his back against the wall, brand new weight class, he had to perform. Not only did he have to perform, he most importantly had to win this fight. There was no way he was going to lose this fight. So we saw him fight a very safe style of fight. Mostly on the outside, mostly with long-range weapons, the leg kick, the straight down the pipe. And then once he noticed Kelvin Gastelum about to close the distance, he would crash in, hold him, and stop that pressure. So once again, a switch in mentality, the same theme going through the whole entire card. Every single fighter coming in with a different kind of mentality than we've seen them fight before. And what about the main event? The man of the show, Jorge Masvidal. He has to be the best example of a fighter with a mental switch in the game. Masvidal, for a very long time, has been known for losing split decisions. He himself will tell you that he was not as aggressive as he should have been. He lost the killer instinct that brought him to the game. And because of that, a lot of fights that he should not have lost, a lot of fighters that he should have been able to stop, he was not able to stop, leading to a split decision loss. But Masvidal decided, I believe he made that decision in the Donald Cerrone fight, that this is not going to be the case anymore. I'm done losing split decisions. I'm done playing around with these guys. In his own words, he's going to start baptizing opponents now. And that is exactly what we've seen Masvidal done ever since. Every single one of his wins from Donald Cerrone has been dominant. It has been dominant because the man made a switch in mentality to go from passive to aggressive. And in that fight versus Nate Diaz, we saw some incredible offense from Masvidal. The way he was able to mix up the combinations from his boxing to kicks, mixing up shots to the head with shots to the body going high, low. He damaged and hurt Nate Diaz repeatedly in that fight. Possibly could have ended that fight if it wasn't for the stoppage. But man, looking at the whole entire card, looking at how every single fighter performed, including Derek Lewis, the Black Beast, came in with a different mentality as well, decided to implement a heavy strength and conditioning training that led to him losing weight and, of course, giving him more conditioning, allowing him to go harder. I mean, we saw he had so much more offense in that fight versus Blagor Ivanov, who, Jesus Christ, the man can take a shot. But the whole entire theme of this event, the reason why every single fighter performed, including the Darren Till versus Kelvin Gastelum fight that a lot of people were booing. I feel like people were booing the fight because, they were spoiled. Every single fight before that was extremely exciting and it was basically a slugfest. And then Kelvin Gastelum and Darren Till kind of slowed things down a little bit. It wasn't a bad fight, but in comparison to other fights, it was a little bit lackluster. But still, the same theme, a switch in mentality. Every single fighter showed up to perform. And what that makes me think is, are we going to see more of that? Are we going to start seeing fighters decide, you know what, man, we are done leaving this to the judges. We're done playing around here. We're done being safe. It's time to switch things up. It's time to make a switch. A lot of times you're going to hear a coach say, man, if that fighter could perform in the octagon as well as he performs in the gym, he would be a champion. And that is true because in the gym, you don't have a lot to worry about. You're not under the bright lights. You're not fighting in front of thousands of people. The added pressure is not there. So you can kind of take risks. If you get knocked out, so what? If you get hurt, so what? There's no one there to watch. There are no cameras in there. You know what I mean? I wonder what's going to happen if every fighter decides, you know what, man, we are done playing around here. It's time to go in there and do what we actually came to do, which is fight. What's going to happen? What is this sport going to look like? Are we going to start seeing the absolute best in every single fighter? Thanks to guys like Jorge Masvidal bringing awareness to the fighter that goes in there and actually fights as opposed to playing it safe. Now, of course, as fighters get older, we see that with guys like I said, GSP, John Jones, Jose Aldo. As fighters get older and get smarter and more intelligent and they become aware of the damage, of the effects of taking too much damage in a fight, yeah, you're going to see fighters, fight a little bit more smart, have a strategy and not just go into a slugfest every single time like Justin Gaethje. But I'm still curious. Watching this event, are we going to see more fighters take that approach, have a switch in mentality, and decide to actually fight? Let me know in the comment section what you guys think.